I would like to welcome you in this new chapter where we're going to be learning about function-like entities. And a function-like entity is anything that is really going to work like a function in C++. And we know that a function really does a couple of things. A function is going to take input, and the input is going to be in the form of parameters that we pass to the function. The function is going to do something in its body, and it is optionally going to return something that we can use in our C++ programs. So in this chapter, we will see that we have different ways we can set up things that work and behave like functions in C++. And we have different ways to do these things, and some ways have advantages that we will learn about as we progress in the chapter here. One common use for function-like entities is to use them as callbacks for other functions. And for example, suppose we have a function whose job is to modify text data, and we don't want to hardwire in the logic to modify text. We want the ability to either, for example, encrypt or decrypt in our modify function, and we can achieve this by not directly doing the modification in the body of our modify function here, but by passing a function handle as input to this function. And when we get to need to do the modification, we will call this function through this function handle and apply the modification, and then we're going to get the output from our modify function here. I know this may sound cryptic to beginners, but this is really going to make things a bit easier, as we are going to see as we progress in the chapter here. So for example, at runtime, we may decide that we want to do encryption with our modify function. So we are going to attach an encryption function to the modify function, and then we're going to pass input. Our input may be A, as we see on the top here, and our output is going to be a D. For example, if we are doing an encryption by moving a few character slots in the alphabet, so we may be adding a 3 to encrypt. For example, if we have A as input, we're going to jump 3 spots and get D as the output here. This may be something we may decide to do in our C++ program. But because we have the flexibility to switch function handles, we can also change our modify function on the spot and tell it to do decryption by attaching a decrypting function handle. And at this point, if we give it a D, it is not going to encrypt it, it is going to decrypt it, and the output is going to be A. Because we have this flexibility to change the modifications we do on the fly, we can even add other kinds of modifications later, and our function is going to pick them up and use them right away, and this is really cool. We're going to see how this works out in C++ programs. So the main benefit of function-like entities in C++ is that we can use them as helper function handles to other functions and make our functions work much more flexibly. Okay, one thing I want you to notice is that this helper function handle here is really a callback. And it is a callback because it will be called back by our modify function in its body when it needs to do so. So you should keep this in mind. The helper function is a callback. It will be called by our modify function anytime it is needed. One thing you should know is that callback functions are heavily used in event-based programming, and graphical user interfaces are good examples of that. I am going to try and give you a simple example here. We can wire our C++ program to have 2 buttons, for example. We have a button that, for example, moves the player up, and we have another button which is going to move the player down. We can wire up our logic so that when somebody clicks on the up button, we will call the function that is pointed to by the app function handle. And this app function handle is really going to be connecting to the move up function here. We can also wire up our logic so that whenever somebody clicks on the down button, we can call the function handle that is connected to our move down function. So we can set up something like this, for example, and our code is going to work. When somebody clicks on the up button, this function here is going to be called, and it is going to move the player up. When somebody clicks on the down button, the move down function here is going to be called, and it is going to move our player down. We can do things like this. But notice that in our app logic wiring, we are using callbacks to tell our app logic which function to call when something happens in our C++ program. I realize this is really out of scope for a beginner course like this, but note that function-like entities play a bigger role in making event-based applications work really well, and you may have a chance to learn about that as you progress in your career as a C++ developer. In this chapter, we are going to learn all about function-like entities, and you're going to see all kinds of crazy ways you can use them in your C++ programs. I really can't wait to get started to tell you about these things, so we are going to head over to the next lecture and tell you all about function pointers. Go ahead and finish up here and meet me there.